For the audience today, what insights can you offer about how to be more discerning about the information that we're consuming, and how do you actually judge it?
Yeah, trust is a really tricky concept, right? Because everyone develops trust in a different way, and the things that they value to inform that trust are different. And you have to develop this relationship with your media sources to say that, I've seen this over time. They've demonstrated consistently that they align with what I'm looking for, that they haven't broken my trust, and that I'm going to believe in what they say. I think one of the interesting things is that traditional media sources, there are editors involved. There is a very human curated process to decide what goes out. And yes, there are mistakes every now and then. Yes, there can be bias now and then. But you compare that to your social media platforms who see themselves as postmen, right? They say, don't shoot the messenger. All we're doing is serving what other people have produced to you. So we are not expressing any editorial control, essentially, and they don't want to, right? Keep in mind that most of the social media companies come from the US. Free speech means a very different thing there to here. They don't want to be the arbiters of free speech. And so to them, all they're doing is that they're just repeating or broadcasting the material that's been given to them. Never mind the fact that they have algorithms that are actually deciding what you get shown. They believe that they're just showing you everything. And so that's a very different relationship with the user, in that it's not curated. There's no real sort of accountability for that information source, and the reliable stuff and the not reliable stuff all kind of gets mixed together. And so, yeah, for individuals, I think it's about thinking about that relationship that you have with these different media sources, and what are the things that are important to you in order to be able to develop that trust.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably preaching to the converted in this room, but it's about knowing the titles, the mastheads that you trust, and then the writers that you trust. In the media, we kind of, I think, often overestimate the extent to which that happens. Very often, maybe you yourself have done this sometimes, you've seen a story and then you don't even know where you read it because you're consuming all this stuff all the time. You might have got it through Apple News or Google Discover on your Android phone. You might have picked it up on Facebook. You might have seen the story that Samantha showed before and not be sure where it came from. So it's really important that we both make sure we know the sources and the authors that we trust, but also encourage our kids and our friends to do the same. In terms of that, I mean, you talked about us drowning in information. We never had more of it. That's what you're talking about as well, Andrew. There are some things that could be done. For example, I don't know whether it's the answer or part of the answer at the moment, the UK has got some legislation it's considering which would oblige social media companies, including YouTube, to foreground news publishers' content over non-news publishers. It's not uncomplicated. There are freedom of expression questions in that, but should a piece from RNZ or from Newsroom or the Nelson Mail appear differently in your feed, that endless soup of content, to the way that New Zealand News Daily or other made-up titles do? I think there's a pretty good argument for that.
And I think, like you said, Toby, preaching to the converted perhaps, but just be critical of everything you say. I mean, that's kind of a journalist's perspective on the world. You just can't really believe anything unless you've cross-checked it or verified it, and sort of the same goes for consuming news in a way. I mean, you'd hope you can read something on RNZ and believe it. I'll stand by that. But it doesn't mean it should be your only source of news or information. And I think humans have a tendency to want to rely or to want to get certainty or to want to just look to one place that maybe they can get that. But I think having a really diverse diet of consumption and being aware of the, where all of those, platforms or things you're consuming content come from. If you're just looking at Facebook, like some maybe young people do, then it's going to be very difficult to get a broad diet. You're being presented information through an algorithm. So I think, just being critical, being a bit cynical.
Can I just add also that just building on that is that the term in the academic literature is called lateral reading, and that's what people are trying to encourage people to do, which is not just relying on that one source, but looking at lots of different sources, particularly if the one source that you rely on is compromised in some way, then reading more from that source isn't going to help you. You want to be reading from multiple sources. Something that's happening in places like the US and UK where they have larger media landscapes is that you've got companies like Ground News who are able to aggregate all of these, all the different news articles about the same story, and then provide some analysis to say, oh, these ones are left-leaning, these are right-leaning, these ones are in the sort of the centre, here are the kind of sources of bias that are influencing them. That approach doesn't really work well in New Zealand because we don't have the plurality of news sources. Like, we just don't have very many news sources, so you might get 3 articles about something. But it's worth watching what's happening overseas because we might be able to apply some of those methods here as well.
Toby, in your opening remarks, you showed us the short form content that you've been putting out, and we're seeing media companies increasingly adapt to what is clearly a change in people's attention span and a fight to get people's attention. Why do you think in that, as that reality sets in, podcasts are also becoming more popular and kind of having their moment at the moment? This has obviously become a big focus for you, but how is it true that we only have a few seconds of someone's attention, but also a podcast can go for over an hour or in some cases even longer, and people seem to enjoy that long form content? Where does that sit for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When it's studied, it's often considered in the same category. So that, and there's a word that's become used called platformization. But basically what it means is that everything exists, a lot of the content that is produced now exists outside of the platform that created it. So an RNZ podcast is consumed on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Some content from the spin-off might be consumed on Instagram. And whereas in the past we saw those channels as referral mechanisms, like you will see this thing and it will send you to our website, now we're more agnostic about that. We're more accepting of the idea that it can exist on another platform. And again, there are pros and cons with that. The good thing about podcasts, I think, and maybe this is certainly in my interest to think this, but is that I think the growth in podcast consumption continues to grow. I mean, there was a study, the Asia New Zealand do a study every year, which is fantastically interesting. And for the first time they asked about podcasts. They asked, where did you get your news from Asia? And 30% of people said podcasts. And I thought, that's good, because I think that's a proxy for in-depth. Not always. Not all podcasts are in-depth. Not all podcasts are long-form. But broadly, if you're consuming something in a podcast form, you're really interested in it, and you're going to get beyond that sort of 15-second reel or the TikTok quick kind of opinionated version. So I'm encouraged by the growth of podcasts generally.
Can I test a hypothesis, though? Can you put your hand up if you actually listen to podcasts on a regular basis? Okay, that's a lot better than I expected, to be fair, which is good.
That didn't land how you were expecting, did it?
Well, I was thinking it would be about 30%.
Just proving
right?
it. He's got a theory.
They're all listening to Joe Rogan, that's it.
Okay, we're going to go to another one of the audience questions. This one's from William Mills. As a news consumer, how can we support real news, real caps lock, real news, and help combat the AI slop tsunami? So a great opportunity, I guess, to speak to, for the audience, how can we get behind good media, and media that we can trust?
Subscribe to the platforms that you like, because that means journalists will be paid to create some of that content.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's an encouraging question because, media have taken quite a lot of flack, and a lot of it is deserved, and a long way from perfect. Always can improve, but as long as the media keep on becoming more impoverished and the money. Sorry to get on my soapbox again, but all the money is going to Facebook and Google, then people who can say, yeah, just like I used to, or maybe still do, pay for a subscription to a newspaper and magazine, I will subscribe to a website, whatever it is. A New Zealand-based news media, if you can find a way to pay for some of that, then I think you're doing your bit, and become a bit of a proselytizer to your friends and communities too.
Andrew, can I put the last part of that question to you, which is it's around the AI slop tsunami. So, I mean, in terms of the volume of content being produced and the increasing amount of that content that you talked about coming from AI, where do you think things will sort of self-correct as far as quality is concerned, or is the beige that we now see, or the kind of common language that's coming through, or shifting our vocab even at the moment, is that going to come right, or can we expect to just keep getting worse in terms of quality?
I'm trying to think about how to frame this optimistically, positively.
No pressure. No pressure.
So the problem fundamentally is it's just economics. It's just too cheap to create slop, right? It costs a news agency a couple $100, maybe $1,000 to, like, at a minimum, to get a good story out, right? Just in terms of the journalist time and the infrastructure and everything else. It costs a couple of cents or less to click a button and just get some trash out there, right? So it's just by volume, you're going to be fighting a losing war. The filters are kind of what we need to keep developing. So from a technical perspective, kind of filtering out the fake stuff from the real stuff. The difficulty is that the AI systems are being trained to produce as realistic stuff as possible. And by the way, anybody who uses like an AI detector website to tell you if a bit of text is AI, like, I wouldn't trust that at all, because there's no way that those systems are actually accurate. They might be better than a coin toss, but they're not going to be like 100% accurate. Like, just by volume, you know, it's going to be hard to beat. So yeah, sorry, I was saying filters, we have some technical solutions, but the last filter that we have is the one in our brains. And that's the thing that we need to train and trust.
Keeping rolling with the audience questions, because there are a number of them still coming through. So this one is from Anna Crosby. Apparently the most critical business skill for 2026 is critical ignoring. And it's a new skill to learn to not suck up all the information put before us. What are the panelists' thoughts on surviving the ignoring?
Surviving the ignoring. Yeah, I hope I haven't got the wrong end of the stick here, but we talk in media about a growing phenomenon called news avoidance. Which is perhaps a slightly different thing. Like, knowing when to put down your phone is a big challenge for many of us, and that's whether as ourselves or as parents, and that's hugely important. There's a separate thing, the other end of that, which is concerning, which is when people see the zone has been flooded, per the Steve Bannon dictum. There's so much happening. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming. It's, what do they call it? Doom scrolling, da-da-da-da. And so people, friends of mine, understandably go, you know what, I'm out. I'm not going to engage with this stuff anymore. I'm going to have a little bit of a look at Instagram, but I'm not reading any news. And that's terrifying because, again, part of the democratic process is engagement in it, all those sorts of things. And so, yeah, it's a hell of a challenge. Don't know what the answer is, but finding a way to avoid getting sucked in without giving it up entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I could only echo that. I think it's probably a very personal thing for people. I know what my capacity is like for consuming news sometimes when I'm not working. And, you know, there's still a need to remain engaged and want to know what's going on, but then there's also personally a real desire to be able to switch off and not just feel inundated with content. So I'm not sure what the answer is either, but there is obviously a balance there in terms of having time out, but also, you know, remaining engaged.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to get better at as a society is to not conflate being informed with being intelligent. It's something that is so ingrained in like our culture that, you know, even just historically, the upper classes read the newspaper and the lower classes did not, right? And now it is like people going, oh, I need to be informed and engaged so that I can have an intelligent conversation with anything about almost anything. And we just don't need to. Like, most of the things that are happening in the world actually have no impact on us. And conversely, most of the things that are happening in the world, we have no control over, we have no influence over on the other direction. So why is it relevant to us? So I'm not saying here, therefore don't read any news at all, but I think we can all afford to be a bit more selective with what it is that we're consuming.
On a related question that's come through here, which is around the responsibility of moderating the conversation, which I know is a big challenge. So this is from Claire Williamson. She said, given how polarising social media is and how combative the comment sections are, does the media have a responsibility to better moderate its channels, pushing back, hiding false comments, blocking, etc.? where does that sit with you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we have a huge responsibility to do that well. And I think in my career, I've seen the sort of metrics on that change all the way from just not having comments open because it's going to be a hotbed of, awfulness. So, we're not going to do that, to having someone sitting at a desk all day moderating comments, because while some of that can be automated and done, probably by AI, you need a human there to sift through that stuff. So yeah, that's a really tricky one because we need to do it well. But then on the flip side of that, we have, stories, this happened with a story of mine recently actually, get posted on Facebook. So we might not have comments on an RNZ story, but, it gets posted on Facebook and there's comments underneath that. We'll have someone moderating those comments, but, how quickly are they being dealt with? What are the metrics for dealing with them? Yeah, I'm sure we could be doing better in that space. And when those stories are posted on pages that aren't ours, we don't have any control over that. So that's a whole other, can of worms as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the pendulum swung back a bit on that in terms of having all these comment threads open everywhere. We have brought back comments, but only for signed-in members, paying members. It's true that, like, if you put a story on x.com, there's no way, even if it's your own story, I don't think there's any way to moderate the comments that appear underneath it. Facebook you can to some extent. I saw once the New Zealand Herald's list of automatic blocks on comments, and it's amazing. It's about 3 pages, and it's got, a whole lot of kind of colourful language, but also all the names of all the people who have name suppression or for whom there's legal. I'd like to publish it, but it would be a legal nightmare. But yeah, so there are some tools that people can use. It's definitely an obligation, I think, on publishers to be alert to that stuff. As ever, boring, but it's a resource problem as well.
Yeah, I think the principle is that the platforms should be responsible for moderating. So if you have comments on your own website, then the news media source has to moderate. But places like Facebook should be moderating. The challenge is that it's a resourcing one and it's a free speech one. The cost that it takes to remove a piece of content in an intelligent way that is resilient to challenge is going to cost more than the time that it takes for somebody to write the comment in the first place. So that's the fundamental bit of time, cost economics that no one's really been able to solve. Even if we start saying, we're going to use AI to moderate the comment section and start to filter things out automatically, it's just not going to be resilient to challenge. And then you have to spend more time and money on an appeals process. And that's not fair either. So there's a tricky question here around the role of the public square, how we communicate with each other with these comments and who they're supposed to be visible to. Once upon a time, we didn't have the ability for anybody to be able to say anything about anything, and even if you were writing letters to the editor, the editor was still screening them and able to filter out the really bonkers ones, and that ability is gone. And we should decide as a society if that's actually good for us. We can make these policy decisions, right? As a society, we could all say we actually just don't want comment threads anymore, and tell our governments to legislate to turn that off. That's unpopular and probably extreme position to take, but I'm just suggesting that just because the technology has enabled it to happen doesn't mean that we need to accept that it's the only way it should be.
A question to sort of build on that, which is a recent development, and I know has been covered by the spin-off quite extensively, is of course the Broadcast Standards Authority. So I mean we're sort of dancing around the controls here. What are the guardrails? And one of the questions is that prior to the internet, the Broadcasting Standards Authority ensured that dangerous, harmful information or content didn't reach the public. Why have we not been able to achieve this with the internet or post the internet? And to take some license on that question again is, where do you see the future of the media regulations sitting now with the disestablishment of the Broadcast Standards Authority? And realistically, will we ever be able to get to some form of moderation that's like what we had, or has the horse bolted on this? Go on, Toby.
I mean, it's a huge question. Many successive governments in New Zealand have attempted to grapple with that and have not followed through. And so it's the sort of explosion of the BSA has happened in a really weird roundabout fashion. Some of you know the story of that. It's certainly an absurdity when you have a bunch of organisations that are really trying to make content out of the smell of an oily rag being held to by regulators, range of different regulators we've got in New Zealand, some statutory, some not, while anyone publishing anything from overseas basically has almost complete free reign, like up to, with a few exceptions, including some things like child pornography or terrorist manifestos. I mean, but apart from that, it's like just go for it. So that it doesn't make sense, and it's a really hard thing to grapple with. Like, do we apply a different standard to something that is created in Nelson to something that is created in Silicon Valley? I don't know. It's hard, and one of the things that, you know, there are sort of different technological fixes to some of that. There are statutory fixes to some of that. I'm interested in this territory of, I mentioned that if you were to regulate to require digital platforms, the Metas, the Alphabets, whatever, to authenticate to get a certain kind of privilege in that ecosystem, you need to adhere to a certain set of principles, which might be a bit like the Media Council, which is the regulator we're part of, which is a voluntary membership system, and which is probably going to have to step in to fill that void, I guess. Sorry, that's the best I can do, Johnny.
Yeah, there's definitely changing definitions of publisher, right? And there's like the legal definition, but then there's the definitions that we're all kind of living with. I should say that I'm now on the Media Council Complaints Board, and I'm not speaking on their behalf at all. But you know, it's going to be really tricky when the BSA kind of disappears, because it turns out that the BSA deals with fewer complaints per year than the Media Council does, but the BSA has about 7 times more staff. And it comes down to the fact that broadcasts take longer to review than a news article does. And like, that's just a resourcing question, really, in terms of how to regulate that space. I would almost like to think that, you know, all of the publishers in New Zealand are generally well-intentioned. Like, let's just say that, right? Like, generally well-intentioned, and most of the things that you get in terms of complaints are more mistakes than malicious. That's a very broad, sweeping statement, and again, not a comment from anybody who might be contracting me. But you know, generally speaking, it's positive, right? And people, and you tell them that they made a mistake, and they say, "Oh yes, okay, we own up to that," right? Completely different world when it's the offshore players and the platforms, and we just haven't taken the fight to them. You know, we're kind of almost misprioritizing our time and resource, focusing on our local players and trying to regulate them more and more, when all of the harms are coming from other people. And we just kind of say, oh, well, we don't want to take the fight to Meta because they might take Facebook away from us. I don't know if that might be that bad a thing at this point, right? Like 15 years ago, people would be scared of taking that service away, but now, I don't know, you need to do some more survey work on this, but I think there is more and more of an appetite to, you know, actually take the fight to those big international tech companies and say, whatever service you're providing in our country has to work for us.
Sam, I want to come to you with a follow-up question. A follow-up question in relation to that. I'm just reflecting on the conversation that we've been having, and potentially our own echo chamber up on stage here. This has been quite a binary discussion in terms of the harm of platforms and social media, or the unregulated nature of that, and the value of trust in media in the fourth estate. But of course, we know that trust in the media, in traditional media, has been declining. We know that the pandemic was particularly corrosive for trust with the media. And of course, we've got the perfect storm of resources being sucked out of the sector at a time where we need the quality and integrity of the work to be more robust than ever. What's your feeling about the changing nature of media agencies and organisations? And I'm thinking about even Toby's comments at the outset here around trusting the masthead, trusting the news source that you relate to or you feel comfortable with. But of course, we've also seen that increasing polarisation of those news sources, whereby that's an echo chamber in its own right. So generally, how do you judge the state of media organisations at the moment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Johnny. I mean, if we look at our region, we've had a newspaper here for more than 150 years. I should be able to remember exactly how long it is, but I can't. But a really long time, and that's gone obviously through various different... it's been owned by different people over the years, and it's entered an interesting transition where what was once two sort of... Stuff and the Nelson Mail being, almost one and the same entity are now two very separate entities. It was really interesting to see how that split occurred and to see a lot of the content that the really hardworking journalists here at the Mail produce is now behind a paywall essentially under the press website, as are all the other South Island newspapers. I don't know that was communicated really well to a broader audience. I think if you know that there are journalists here that work for Stuff and then you don't see any of their content on the main Stuff page ever, you kind of think, well, what's going on there? Who's doing this work? Do these people still exist? And yeah, if you subscribe to the press and if you click on the Nelson Mail section, there's really great content there every single day from the journalists that are working in this region. And I'm not sure about the perception of that in the wider community, if people are really aware of how those things function. And, partly I think that's on us as media, maybe not communicating those things well. The change, we sometimes have a tendency to get quite invested in what other media are doing and report on that, if anyone's ever seen Shane Curry's Media Insider column. But yeah, I've got a bit distracted, Johnny, so I don't know if I answered your question there. But I think locally it is very interesting. We, working in the region here, I'm very aware of the landscape, but I'm not sure that that's an understanding amongst the community more broadly.
We're coming to the end of our time together, and we've got a hard finish because Toby has a taxi booked outside, and so that's helpful because otherwise I may have just continued this on. But I do want to give each of the panellists a chance to put their final thoughts or remarks to the audience on this massive topic that we've been grappling with, which of course would justify a whole day's discussion. And I'm mindful in passing the microphone back for final words that we started on a positive note and an optimistic note. There are some massive challenges that we're grappling with there, but there is a question or an invitation here. Is there anything reassuring you can offer to alleviate the fear that this generates? So I'm going to put that question to each of you to close, and I'll start with you, Andrew, and come along, which is what's your message or advice or encouragement for the audience for not just how to be a good citizen or a good consumer of media and information, but actually what can we do to meaningfully and positively impact or make a difference in these challenges we're facing?
Yeah, I probably have three coming off the top of my head. One is using whatever influence you have to government and telling them that this is something that you care about, that media is not neutral, and that there are options and tools available to government to influence that and to try and make it better and stronger. Two is that in this growing age of AI and slop, humans will crave authenticity more than ever before, and that's an opportunity for businesses and people to kind of get out there and make sure that they are being real authentic to themselves and using that in their messaging. And the third is really just what I said at the beginning, which is in an age where it is going to be easier and easier to consume media by yourself on your phone, on your computer, and to kind of just get that straight from the screen to the brain and then have no further conversation about it, to really encourage people to keep talking to each other, and to not just do that in like Facebook Messenger, but to actually talk to each other in person, and to just talk about the news and talk about the articles that you're seeing, because oftentimes if it is misinformation, all it takes is saying it out loud to somebody else to make you realize how silly a thing that was to have believed, right? And if you still believe it, the other person will tell you, no, you're a nonce. That makes no sense. It's a remarkable community resilience that we just aren't using enough because we kind of all think that we're smart enough to filter it out ourselves. So yeah, really encourage people to just keep talking to each other.
Yeah, it's a great point. The power of the water cooler conversation is massive, and the change we've witnessed. I mean, when I'm doing all the research for the podcast that Johnny mentioned, I spent a lot of time consuming media from the 80s and 90s, and it was a lot of it wasn't great. Like some of it was full of biases and emphases that might not be good. But pretty much everyone was reading the same morning paper. Pretty much everyone was watching the same 6 p.m. bulletin. And I think of it a bit like a summary of facts at the start of a trial. It's like, here are some things we can begin with, and they're agreed. That's gone. It's all fragmented now. And so the problem is when two people encounter each other at the water cooler, they might have totally different versions, let alone different subjects. And so that's a democratic challenge. But the conversation is critical. Continuing to support the mastheads that you think are valuable and that you think have worth. And then also talk to your kids, talk to your friends, critique the work you're looking at, make sure that we all have our radars as tuned as we can be while we work our way through this weird blur of slop and misinformation, because, you know, people are smart. Once they engage, then we can see it, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like I see this in my work, is that humans just want connection and community, and they want to feel like they belong, and they want to feel like they're understood. And sometimes people find that in places where there is, you know, misinformation or, you know, things maybe necessarily they found connection amongst a community because of a common topic or a common thread or a grievance. And so I think it's just really important. Anything that encourages community, encourages difficult conversations, not being in an echo chamber necessarily, whether that's online or, you know, simply the people that you spend time with, having difficult conversations at the water cooler. I mean, it's all kind of seems like very, very obvious stuff, but I'd also echo the sentiment, you know, just subscribe to or pay for journalism that you like and consume a varied diet of it.
And keep coming to Aspire. All of these things about connections, and you know, it strikes me that from all of the discussions we've been having, that people, you know, even one of our Aspire conferences focused exclusively on AI, and there was a certain irony to that because it was people in the that was at a kind of peak in terms of people's interest or introduction to tools like ChatGPT, and more than anything in that moment what they wanted to do was get together with other people and talk about it. And so that's one of the things that we know to be true. So thank you very much for your contributions to the panel. Thank you for joining us, and particularly for travelling as well, Andrew and Toby. And we really appreciate your insights and the generosity in which you've contributed to today's conversation. Please give them a round of applause.